are these people?
Want to be a little lighthearted. I felt last week we were very heavy-handed, especially given the number of segments that we did produce that we're still premiering this week. But obviously, a lot of you know, if you are in the online world, especially on Twitter, we're seeing a lot of blaming, as well as mainstream media, a lot of blaming as to, people or groups blaming each other in terms of Trump being president now, and just a lot of finger pointing and shaming in terms of how people voted. The reality is, we're kind of stuck. If you're like wanting to work within the duopoly, you weren't going to get exactly what you wanted either way. That's been generally our stance here at the network, especially between us. So I found this article, as I said earlier, and as Reef commented, as I kind of read it through with him and Indy last night, it is a little flowery, very not superficial, but very surface level. But I think, and this is my hope, that once, coming into the new year, that especially in independent media, that we really start having conversations in terms of what true organizing will look like and how to kind of build upon that, not just in the age of Trump, but following, because the reality is, regardless of who's president, we're still going to need that kind of work in order to get the things that we want, or to have a truly progressive country that people are looking for. So I think this might be the beginning of maybe segments I want to cover maybe in the future in terms of what that can look like. And, I talked to a few people online because it's trying to ask, like, what can I do? What should I be doing? How can I get involved? And I think, especially in independent media, I think those are the conversations that we should be having. And I don't want to necessarily hear about Trump every other segment from different folks. So
you can get that plenty of places elsewhere too if you want it.
Sure. But I mean, as for me, being an activist on the ground and actually having those conversations with my group yesterday night, our activism is going to look different moving forward. Obviously, like
much more active, probably for a lot of people's, unions and whatever.
Right. So, unions are going to be at risk. The idea that now, just with the conversations that I had with our executive director and then some of my other colleagues in Empower Ed, that's a teacher organization that I'm a part of, like our leadership in DC, like locally, will probably be a lot more conservative in terms of Trump. Like they're going to hold back because they don't want to have a target on their heads. And we don't have home rule here. So, so that can affect some of the policies that they may want to implement. So obviously working with kids, the Department of Ed, I know that was kind of a big thing. And even as a teacher, I don't even know what that means. So those of you who are kind of saying this is going to happen, we don't know that. I'm not sure even for me how that's going to work. But the idea is right now we should be basically prepping to go to war, regardless, and see and let the chips fall where they may. So all that to say, I brought in this article from Truthout, written by Kelly Hayes, where she writes, "Let's move beyond blame to fight for each other in the face of fascism. While principled critiques are often necessary, let's communicate like people who still need each other, because we do." And she continues, "This is a moment of tragedy and turmoil for our movements. A fascist game show host has seized the reins of government again and is now poised to enforce a Christian nationalist agenda. J.D. Vance, a product of Silicon Valley who subscribes to the techno-fascist views of Curtis Yarvin, will soon be an unreliable heartbeat away from the presidency. Last month, I warned of a revolution slouching towards Bethlehem, one that wasn't ours. Now that right-wing revolution is here. In the coming days, many will write about what to expect and how to resist. My biggest concern, however, is that many people of conscience aren't ready to put up a fight, at least not one aimed at our true enemies. Even before Trump's devastating victory, many activists and organizers were exhausted, felt that, isolated, also felt that, and disheartened, felt that. Our world was already marred with injustice, from the genocide in Palestine to the countless premature deaths manufactured by poverty, incarceration, war making, and the violence of borders. For some, the wave of violence we're about to face merely blurs into the violence they have already witnessed or experienced. But for many of us, this moment of escalation, which could include the obstruction of any future democratic intervention, is chilling. I've already spoken to two friends, one of whom is a disabled trans person, who are both experiencing, I'll say, offing themselves in the wake of this election. This is a devastating time, and I'm deeply concerned about how people are processing what's happening. So far, I see two dominant reactions: outrage and despair. For friends in despair, I offer empathy and support, promising that I and others will fight for them. Some of us will come together to defend life-sustaining care, including gender-affirming care. We will sharpen our skills, break laws, build alliances, and take care of each other. We will find ways to defy and obstruct Trump's regime and to work to mitigate its harms. I know this work will happen. However, I worry about how many of us will take up this fight and how many who consider themselves good and decent will, instead, keep fighting each other. Many people are justifiably angry. They're angry about threats to healthcare, abortion access, and the potential of mass deportations. They are angry about the looming threats that trans people, migrants, Black people, Muslims, scientists, teachers, librarians, and many others are now facing. Scapegoated groups Trump has demonized will face both legal and extra-legal assaults. The president-elect has pledged to abolish the Department of Ed, and Project 2025's blueprint for change, including plans to privatize FEMA and slash environmental protections, is the stuff of nightmares. Anger over the pending loss of so many rights and lives is exploding in all directions. Many people are lashing out at anyone whose words, actions, or scroll down, please,
Yes, sir.
inactions have disappointed them, casting blame and deeming any perspective but their own incomprehensible and irredeemable. It feels as though a lot of people have given up on each other, and that scares me. Zoom out.
Yep. Ah, this one.
When an election ends badly, there's always a blame game. That's nothing new. But in this moment, our movements,
All right.
oh,
There you go.
and many who claim to care about trans lives, abortion access, migrants, and the planet were already fractured. Leftists were profoundly alienated and siloed, warped by trauma and disillusionment. Some are bitterly disappointed by allies they feel have failed to adequately support Palestinian survival and liberation. Others are furious with leftists who didn't support Harris or rally movements behind her as they did for Biden in 2020. Everyone has opinions on who failed and how. I believe there's plenty of blame to go around. Our movements have made serious missteps. Organizers have made moral compromises, sometimes the wrong ones. Many people feel disregarded or wrongly vilified, and many of these grievances are grounded in reality. Our dependence on social media, which has intensified in harmful ways during the pandemic, has only worsened these divides. While these platforms hold some utility for our movements, we were never meant to live the bulk of our political lives in these realms. Social media has changed our ability to communicate across difference, rewarding acrimony, sacrimony, and excommunication. Modeling politics has too often replaced the work of doing politics. At some point, many people of conscience lost the ability to engage in principled disagreement, even if they ever bothered to learn. For many, persuasion isn't even an option anymore. Quite often, political discourse is about categorizing people, dividing us into the morally correct and the morally irredeemable, with no middle ground and no plan to change the math. It's as though many people believe they can simply disqualify the majority of humanity from political life, thereby saving the world. As an organizer, I find this concerning, to say the least. This is a climate in which post election angst has taken hold. People are lashing out in all directions, solidifying rifts with people they will ultimately need if they plan to participate in the work of collective survival. I understand why. Anger is easier to inhabit than sadness. It's easier to be angry than to feel the loneliness of knowing so many people have co signed your potential destruction. Lashing out at people who disappoint us can also deliver a small dose of satisfaction. Many people are desperate for that sensation right now. We live in a society that wrongfully conflates justice with satisfaction, so our efforts to punish the people we disagree with may feel like the pursuit of justice. As the hope of true justice fades into the distance, the pursuit of a cheap hit of satisfaction becomes all the more appealing. It's important to remember that our political aspirations have not been vanquished. We are not on the cusp of positive transformation, but that does not mean that all hope is lost or that we cannot breathe new worlds into being. During my 4 decades on this earth, I've repeatedly witnessed victories and political transitions that I did not believe were possible. I've also experienced losses that reshaped the political terrain, paving the way for future victories. We should never give up on transformation and material change. We are all worth fighting for, no matter how bleak the situation may be, and no matter the odds. Determined, organized people have toppled dictators, ended oppressive institutions, including chattel slavery, and freed each other from the clutches of carceral systems. In dark times, people have always found ways to make their own light. That work is now upon us. To undertake it, many of us must face feelings we'll rather avoid. People who cannot self regulate emotionally or engage in principled disagreement will not create stable, sustainable movements. You can't organize people you hold in contempt. As I write these words, I can already hear some people justify their anger. I will not argue with your litany of grievances against your potential allies. I have a lot of justified anger too, but I try to be selective about expressing it because my political goals matter more to me than the temporary satisfaction of lashing out. If you believe the world is at stake, as I do, ask yourself, how much discomfort is the whole world worth? How important is your need to lash out? How can you balance your impulses with what you know must be done? I am not saying to suppress your anger or hold it inside. It's important to have outlets. This is a good time to vent the fury we need to express in group chats, with trusted friends, and in therapy. Be intentional about where you put these feelings. If you need to break something, then break something as safely as you can. Rage rituals are a legitimate form of self expression. As Fiona Apple said, better that I break the window than him or her or me. To
Dude,
everyone hurting right now, please make space for your grief. Don't let anger shield you from sadness or bury your pain in escapism. Let your heart break over what's ahead. Accept that, no matter how hard we fight, there are harms we will not halt. If that awareness brings you tears to your eyes, then weep. Spend time with your grief, share it, and find comfort in your loved ones. Engage with the land and water and feel your connection to the biosphere we must defend. Immerse yourself in art, music, and all that remains beautiful in this world. Humanity is flawed, but our capacity for kindness, connection, and transformation is real too. Take solace in decency, it's still there. Our capacity to do good can be nurtured. It can grow and flourish, but that cultivation is collective work. We cannot change the world alone. We must learn how to be flawed and be human and messy together. We must learn how to forgive and how to do the work of collective survival with people we don't like or understand. We must recognize that while principled critiques are often necessary, we have to communicate like people who still need each other, because we do. Oh, there's one more. A lot of people out there are not going to be ready to do the work I'm describing until they make space for the grief and pain and for the grief and pain of others. If you are hurting right now, remember that the pain you are feeling is a natural consequence of your decency. Don't try to bury that. Nurture the tender parts of yourself. Your capacity to feel each other's pain is extrinsically linked to your potential to change the world. Your grief is bound up in your understanding that an injury to one is an injury to all, and that all of our fates are connected. Evading your grief will only compound your angst and isolation, will even increase your tolerance for injustice. We cannot afford to let that happen. So I have a little more other than this, but this is the end of the article at least. So, thoughts?
I have some. I don't know if I'm going to be able to articulate them well enough to like
Sure.
not come across like an asshole. You know,
Sure.
like I get what they're trying to do, right? I think it's rooted in a bit of like fear mongering that we've been bought into, like a bit, you know, and it just feels like we've been doing these things. We've not seen you,
Right.
you know, like
Right.
that to me is part of this, where it's like,
right.
all this talk of unity and whatever after you lose,
Right.
and I don't know this person's
No.
specific, like, you know, who wrote this? Kelly Hayes from Truthout, and Truthout has been a little wonky at times, at least for my taste, but it's more about like, where was this attitude 8 years ago, 6 years ago, or like, we've dealt with this before, you know. So for me, it's we're the ones talking to people like the anti-war guys who we don't agree with politically on everything, right? We talk to libertarians and anarchists, and there's a lot we agree on. We've been doing that already.
I mean, I would even argue, even within our network, we're like, I think we're kind of aligned in a lot of ways, but in other ways we're not. And those conversations are private. But
and it just feels like, look, all that rage and anger you have, don't use that. Like, get over that so we can go back to decorum.
But you know what she said there, what I'm glad she said, she acknowledged the fact that there have been people who have been doing this work for a long time, and they have probably every right to be frustrated,
right?
Because this is the shit that I've been saying for the last few months. It's the idea, like, what I'm seeing online is that your candidate didn't win, so you're going to take your ball and go home because you're pissed off, instead of really kind of getting your, and the idea that people are like, oh, we'll push her left once she's in. It's kind of like, no, you won't. Because you weren't doing that under Biden. You were out partying or whatever, while the real ones who are actually doing the work were basically being like, where the, as you said, where the fuck are you? Like, I've said this many times.
I've seen that recently, of like, oh, people are actually able to call out the neocons and whatever going into this new, it's like, I'm already seeing people like start to pay attention again. And it's like, why do you guys only do this
for the people that you hate?
For the blue team, like,
right. Yeah.
You know.
And I wish Kelly kind of spoke into that, because it does seem more, there's definitely seems to be, I'm not sure if she intended to have that bias, but there definitely seems to be a bias there.
And I get it.
In terms of,
this is the feeling in the Truthout writers' room too. Like, you know, she mentioned that this is her colleagues and the people she works with, and you know, I get all of that. At the same time, you know, this feels like, I don't know, it just feels like something we're already doing.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. I think for me, and I've said this many times, but basically since 2020, like, I felt abandoned. in terms of I was like, and I only started like my activism like 2019. So basically just before like George Floyd, like just before, the pandemic hit, I was just starting to get my feet wet, just being on the ground and actually trying to organize. So basically I kind of came into it at a really pivotal time, with George Floyd in particular, plus COVID.
Yeah.
And, and then I remember like 2020, the moment Biden won, everyone's just like, people were celebrating in the streets. And I remember everyone's so excited, like cars honking or whatever. And I was just kind of like, what are you celebrating? What? It's not like, I get that people are celebrating Trump, but it's like there's more work that needs to be done. It's not like we got universal healthcare. It's not like people got, are living homeless people off the street. It's not like children are not like suffering in terms of the education system that we're providing for them. And people weren't necessarily, as I said, it's funny that people care about the Department of Ed now that Trump is in office because it might be dismantled. And my argument is like, the Department of Education is actually shit. Me saying this as a teacher is actually shit. I don't know exactly what they do in there. And I, and I kind of work in kind of in parallel to that, but it's kind of like, what work do you guys do to really progress, to make things equitable for our kids? Because I see it every day. Like, I have kids, even in my school, who are reading on a kindergarten level, and they're in 2nd and 4th grade. Like, what the fuck is this? This is the kind of bullshit I've been seeing. And people are just like, oh, well, Trump is going to do. I'm like, yeah, but this was happening underneath.
That's been happening. It happens regardless of what. Yes, I know. And it's also and then it's the blame is placed on the presidents themselves, whether they do good or they do bad. It wasn't their decisions. It never was their decisions to begin with. So anyway, I just felt like this was like a lot of kumbaya with not a lot of like, kumbaya is just a song if it's not being used for something. You know what I mean?
Here's the thing. Here's the thing, though. I did want to bring this to you because I knew you kind of. I wanted
would feel away.
Yes, I wanted that because I felt. Well, I've been feeling away, and I get where she was coming from with this, but at the same time,
I feel like it's something I've heard before 1,000 times of like unity and all that jazz, and it's like, unify behind us. How about the ones that were being right? How about you come talk to us first? And I don't mean that in a selfish way. I don't mean just myself and Collin. There's plenty that I would point you to as far as the smarter people,
Right.
But at the same time, I'm like, I don't know who it's meant for, and what they're trying to get them to.
I think it's really meant for. Honestly, I think it's really meant for like the regular schmegular folks, probably more liberal, who are kind of like
we're terrified right now
and feel like we got to do something
because of mainstream nonsense.
And look, here's my thing: if you're serious, well, in my mind, I'm like, where the fuck have you been? But if you're serious, I'm like, come on. But my intention, and I've said this maybe within the last 2 weeks. Look, don't expect me to go. Like, I'm more cautious of people now, especially given the activism, because I don't want the people who just go by a trend. I would argue even with Palestine somewhat, we've talked about that too.
Yep.
Like it just seemed to be the trendy thing to be
a lot of bare minimum positions getting fucking.
And look, the reality is, will there be more protests? Maybe. I would guess more likely, but that should have been happening still now, because Biden can still do shit now, even in a lame duck, session. So, I want to have people who are serious, who are willing to do the work, but are willing to do it for the long haul, not when they feel like, when their lives are at stake. Because the reality is, for me, my life is at stake just existing as a Black man in this country. So I don't need you to come along just because you feel scared. I want you to come along because you feel that passion and that vindication to actually make change, and to go about it in a way that I'm going to stay in it at the risk of my life. That's key, to ensure that others get the liberation that they receive, and not just yours.
And you ain't Black.
Because I see a lot of selfishness and a lot of name blaming. It's like people are mad because their comfort is possibly being taken
that
away.
whole thing too is that was the other side of this, where it was like, well, let's not place blame. No, there's some people that like need to be held accountable.
Right.
Like, and you need to be able to. This is the other thing. It's Democrats don't want to look at why things went the way they did. A lot of them already know and still don't want to look at it. Like they don't want to take the onus.
Right. The fact that our leadership is still in place, the Democratic leadership is still in place, is ridiculous. Well, every one of them should be fired.
They've been sheltered so far from what's actually happened that they're like, they don't understand. Like they're bewildered. So they don't get what happened.
So, like I said, as much as look, I only pulled the article because I think, as I said, it's I don't want to say decent, but it's kind of a meh start. But I hope we can give a little more nuance to that moving forward, with actual people that are able to speak more into that nuance. Like, ideally, those are the people that I want to talk to. And I'm only saying that because I've had people who've come to me to talk to me. Actually, if you go to the slide, I think I'm going to skip a slide. Which one? Come on. This one. Like, to shout out to Zach, who I've known online for a very long time.
Zachary.
Who said on Twitter, "What's next? What should we be doing?" And I'm like, "Dude, DM me. Let's talk." And he did. And we started talking. And I'm not going to go into what we talked about. But, but these are the conversations that I think we should be having. And I hope we have them in independent media. So hence this tweet. I appreciate people like Zach, who are asking how to implement parallel lines of power within our communities so we don't have to depend on the duopoly. These are the conversations I'm interested in having, and I hope more people follow suit. So to go back a slide, this is kind of what I'm seeing. Now, this is from Bing Chen. I think he's an influencer that I follow on Instagram. Like, again, he's one that he seems more liberal to me. So I'm not sure if he's necessarily serious, and there was more to, I think he had it as a story that I didn't get a screenshot of, but he had this on his page. So he said, "I'm so grateful to everyone who be fighting the system, and I'm even more fired up to build outside of it, so we're no longer relying on them, government. It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." Frederick Douglass. So I appreciate the tweet, but the Instagram post.
Yeah.
But again, my question is, are you doing this because you're fearing of Trump, or are you doing this because you actually hate our government and you actually want to do something to make our lives better in spite of Trump? So I think those are the questions that people should be asking, versus like this person's fault or that person's fault or the other. That I agree with that sentiment. But what does true solidarity look like moving forward? These are the conversations that we should be having, because a lot of people within the last week and change have showed their ass, basically being like, "Bitches, you're on your own." And I'm like, instead of having that stance, you should be having the stance of, look, we may not like what's going to happen, but we're in for war. And we need as many bodies as available to fight for the people that we care about. Even if you voted the wrong way. And I'll say this right now. If you voted for Trump, I may disagree. Or if you voted for Kamala, I may also disagree, but I understand why. I'm not going to shame you in how you voted, because our system is designed for you to trap you into awful options that you feel compelled to vote for either one of them, when we really should be talking how to break away from it. So if you're not going to have those conversations, I don't want to talk to you, because it should be very obvious that the duopoly doesn't give a shit. It's just like ping pong with you. You're not getting anything necessarily out of it. You might get some crumbs as kind of like a consolation prize, but that's not really the thing that you really need. So, like I said, if you're willing to have those conversations, you know where to follow me online. You can have those conversations with me privately or whatever. But we'll see what happens. But regardless, I'm going to be still here. But I'm going to keep doing it regardless of whoever it is president. So I just hope that others will take that same stance and fight for the long haul and not just for the next 4 years. But this is why conversations like these are like YouTube hates us, but we really don't care. So if you want to have conversations like these moving forward, or if you're interested in maybe having organizers on who actually do the work that we can talk to figure out what does this solidarity / organizing / parallel lines of power look like, how that could be implemented in our community so we're not reliant on our governmental leaders on the federal level. Let us know in the chat. To support our work, please scan the QR code if you have your smartphone, or you can go to the link that you see at the bottom of your screen, or if you're in chat right now, you could type in !donate and the link will pop up in the chat. If you want to donate, any amount helps, as we always say. Take care of yourselves, take care of your communities, take care of your families before you give to us. But if you have any extra to give, we really appreciate it. Even if it's as little as $1, we will love you for it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and please share our content to fight the suppression. And make sure to leave a comment. We do read them. A lot of our story ideas do come from you. So please let us know what stories we should cover or people that we should talk to, especially in this upcoming year. And help us get to free K, just so we're able to have more people see our content and be able to share, and that we're able to grow, because YouTube is not going to help us. So the only help that we do get is from people like you. And thanks for watching. Thank you.